Whatever makes you comfortable. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Father God, we thank you again for today and the opportunity to open your word. Briefly, as we wrap up the Sermon on the Mount, we just thank you, Lord, that we've had such a good time looking at what Jesus said, and it's been a real instructionary time. Father, you've just shown us new truth. We just thank you for that. We ask your blessing today. In Jesus' name, amen. How many of you have ever been through a tornado? How many of you have ever been to a hurricane? Oh, a few more have been to a hurricane than a tornado. That's now I'll ask you more question here, maybe a little bit. How many of you have ever been to an earthquake? Several of them, right? There was something that was portrayed in the movie Twister and several other movies about tornadoes. That if you live in an area where there are tornadoes, you're familiar with it. And they got better at this, but in the movie Twister, there's a couple of scenes where the tornadoes are breaking out, and they show the weatherman. And they've been talking about the storm getting worse and worse and worse. And you know you're in trouble when the weatherman says, if you live in this county, take shelter right now. You ever heard that? I've heard that. And that's sort of scary. Now, when a hurricane comes, it's a little different. I was 7 years old. Our family, and my mom was a single mom, there was another single mom. There was about 4 or 5 kids. We drove from Ohio to Virginia Beach, and it was camping on Virginia Beach. That was our first vacation we ever had, and biggest vacation we ever had. We were there 2 days, and the park ranger drives up and says, we're going to have to ask you to leave the beach. And of course, this is our one vacation. And my mom and the other mom said, why do we need to leave the beach? He said, because there's a hurricane coming. How much time do we have? Oh, you got a day. The hurricane, you got a little advance warning. And so we packed up and we left. And while that was very heartbreaking, because that's where, for me, I fell in love with the ocean, we ended up touring Civil War battle sites and monuments. And it became where I fell in love with history. So you never know what God's going to use. But the picture of that weather person standing there, and it's in all we've all seen on television where you get to the weather guy, Fritz or somebody standing there, In our passage today, Jesus gives a weather forecast. And while the weather isn't his primary point, he starts off with it. And I want us to understand it and sort of see it a little bit. Because basically, he says, storm is coming. Are you ready? Storm is coming. Are you ready? You can break down this passage into that idea. And there's all kinds of storms. I mean, we have, we look at our time and we think this is so weird for us. This is what's going on with us. It's happened in history over and over again. For us, I realize we got the virus pandemic, and however you feel about that, whatever you think about that, it's a reality of how we have to live. It's changed what we do. There's economic stress that goes with that. People have lost their jobs, lost their businesses. Small businesses are, we're losing them right and left, and that's really sad, and it's not needed. The valuation of the stock market, tourism is almost non-existent. It's coming back a little bit. But that's our world today. In Jesus' world, when Jesus said these words, the land of Israel was under a Roman dictatorship. They were occupied by a superpower, a little tiny country occupied by a superpower, where might makes right. The Romans ruled by the Pax Romana, and they ruled with an iron fist. Any social net was totally absent outside of the people you knew in your little village. It was a land of people who were basically peasants and in poverty, and they were stuck there. There were high taxes and a corrupt tax system. There was no democracy, no unions, no labor laws, no human rights. The Romans could basically, you couldn't kill each other, but the Romans could kill you at will, without recourse. In that environment, Jesus preaches the Sermon on the Mount. We've all looked at so many different things about that message, but this is how he concludes it. Therefore, because of everything he said, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the bedrock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. And when Jesus finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he had taught as one who had authority, not as their teachers of the law. Now, the idea behind this is this. Jesus is assuming, and I want you to get this, the story is about the two guys who each built a house. The assumption of it is a storm is coming. And the reality of what we're talking about and what Jesus is doing is he brings this whole message to a conclusion is this. You're alive. A storm is coming sooner or later. You're going to be wise or you're going to be foolish? What does your house look like? That's the idea. Each person builds a house. And the comparison is this, that the houses probably looked good. Every house looks good in good weather, doesn't it? Now, we all remember the 94 earthquake, or what, 94?
Yeah.
How many remember the 71 earthquake? So yeah, listen, we've been around, we're dating ourselves, right? I was actually going to college. I was in Long Beach, going to college, and woke up. Something woke me up, and I woke up, and the curtains were moving, and I went back to sleep. Walked onto my campus to take a midterm, and all my friends came up and says, "I'm surprised you're here." And I said, "Why? We got to take this midterm." They said, "Well, what about the earthquake?" I said, "What earthquake?" They said, "Well, Sylmar's been wiped off the map." That's what they told me. That's where I grew up, in Sylmar. That's where my parents lived. I went in and got a D on that midterm. Then my buddy and I hopped in my Volkswagen, stopped all along the way and bought water. Didn't really have much, little tiny bottles of water in those days. You didn't buy the big gallon jugs. Drove out, started running into roadblocks, but I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I delivered papers in the San Fernando Valley, and I knew a way around. I still know my way around any roadblock you want to put in my way. And we got to my parents' house. By the time we got there at like 2 in the afternoon, there was another family with my parents. Another family from the church living with them. And the guy who was there said, "You know, we want to go back to the house and get some things. So can you go with us and help us?" So we had a little caravan of 3 cars. We drove back over a little deeper into Sylmar where he lived, and we drove up his street and drove up to his house. Man, I wish I lived in that house. My parents lived in this little 3-bedroom little cracker box house there in Sylmar that was nothing. Maybe 1,500 square feet, 1,200 square feet max. We watched it have 3 stories. It was one of these houses where you just like, I'm going to live there someday. And we'd walk in the house, we'd start gathering clothes and everything. I'm looking, well, they got a crack. No more than our house. And so we were loading up the cars, and I finally said, "Why are you living with us and us not living with you?" He says, "Yeah, I'm here, I'll show you." So we go to the back where it's not as planted, and he says, "Look down there." And you can see the foundation, like we looked at a corner, the foundation was right here. The house was right here. The house was literally 10 inches. The house was whole and complete. 10 inches, totally separated from the foundation. But it had been red carpet. If you're not connected with the foundation, it doesn't matter how good the house looks. Does that make sense to you? It just doesn't matter. And sometimes your life can be sailing along and you can be doing really well. I think we were all there. We were in a great time just a few months ago. We were in a time of great economic recovery. Jobs were great. Everything was good. In reality, everything was wonderful and a lot better than it's been in a long time. And then all of a sudden, it isn't. You can be sailing along and everything be fine. You can get to school, graduate from university. I can tell you, we have kids in our family graduating from university this year. They're our grandkids. No ceremonies, no walks, all of that. You get your first job, you can get married, you can be living the dream. Everything looks wonderful. Everything looks wonderful. Each house looks good in good weather. What happens in the storm? What happens there? Jesus is speaking in this message to a Jewish culture occupied by a foreign power whom they want to overthrow. You want to talk about uncertainty. You never knew one day from the next what was going to happen. Each person, each of these guys built their house. Each house experiences a storm. But the story isn't about the storm. The story is about the house. It's about the guys and what they did. It's about building the house that can overcome the storm. Now, in this year, who would have thought in February of this year would look like what it looks like? Only the storm reveals how strong your house is. Only the storm reveals how strong your faith is. Only the storm reveals how strong your spirit is. Virus pandemic and stock market crash and fear is everywhere. People are living in fear. People are living in fear. Adam and I have had many discussions over the years as he went through the verities of who he was and finding himself. And we had a lot of discussions, and a lot of it was political, a lot of it was theological, a lot of it just had to do with common sense. And for a while there, he was finding himself on the other side. And one of the things that came out of all those discussions is this. Wealth and free market society thrives in peace. Liberalism, socialism, communism takes over and thrives on chaos. Storm comes in all kinds of ways. Isaiah 28:16, Isaiah says this. So this is what the sovereign Lord says. This is what God says. See, I lay a stone in Zion, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone for a future foundation. And the one who relies on it will never be stricken. Proverbs 12:7 says, the house of the righteous stands firm. Both people in this parable had a choice to make. And it's the only difference. I would guess that their houses would look exactly alike. The difference was one built on sand and one built on bedrock. And you think, why would somebody be so stupid as to build their house on sand? I got to tell you this. Kathy and I moved into our house on January 5th, 1994. That date sound familiar? On January 17th, we had the earthquake. Now we moved out of a mobile home into a house. In our little cul-de-sac, the 4 other houses had a lot more damage than ours. Ours happens to be on bedrock. It happens to ride the wave of the earthquake the right way. So we were really blessed to be in that house. But as soon as that happened, I started going to Home Depot, and I started going to the Red Cross when they were over there in the Kmart shopping mart. We'd go to their seminars. I'd go about earthquake safety and all of that stuff. And I want to tell you, an earthquake geologist, an earthquake specialist, stood in front of about 50 homeowners, and he brought up a map of Santa Clarita, and he said, just count on the fact that every one of these canyons, the bottom of that canyon is some kind of fault line. It's just fractured out through there. And just understand that. Okay? He says, that's what it always been, it's okay. He says, but understand this. Let me show you this intersection. And he pointed to an intersection on the map, and he said, there's a mountain range that comes this way, a mountain range that comes this way, and a mountain range that comes this way, and they all meet together right in this spot. And there's no bedrock in that spot. You can go down hundreds of feet, and there's no bedrock in that spot. It's all sand. If there's a major earthquake, that will liquefy, and I can guarantee you, they will never ever build anything in that spot. You ever been to Steinmart? That's the spot. All those high-density apartments? That's exactly where. You build your house on sand for a lot of reasons. Sand can mean a lot of things. What is sand? Money is sand. That's what prompted all of this. Sooner or later, somebody ignored the advice. Sooner or later, somebody ignored what they said, what the geologist said. We ever have a major earthquake, I don't want to be there. Yeah, you know, it's all around us, but you know, that's just going to liquefy. Money is sand. You know, and look at what happened in the last few months in the market and all the stuff that's going on. 1 Timothy 6:17 says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Money is sand. People build their life for money. Beauty is sand. For most people. Right? I mean, we all get old. If you're not, you will be. You know. But I say for most people because Kathy and I know some people. You know, what's Ryan's mom's name? Do you remember? Kids grew up, went to high school. One of their good friends is Ryan. They're still good friends with Ryan. Ryan and his wife live up in Agua Dulce, up in the hills up in there. That's the house they bought. And Ryan's mom worked in the schools and worked a long time in the schools there in Saugus, right by their house. Now, I don't know that this woman has had any work done. She is just a few years, she's probably 62. If she walked in the door, you would guess her age to be probably 40. But she works hard, hours and hours and hours to create that look and to be in that kind of shape. Now, the good news is, so here's a beautiful woman, you can't tell how old she is. The bad news is, time marches on. It eventually catches up. Beauty is sand. It eventually is gone. We're all gonna get old. We're all gonna be. You ever watch that commercial for Plexiglass? You know, you put the stuff on your eyes and makes all the bags go away for about 10 minutes. Yeah. Reputation is sand. One wrong thing on social media doesn't even have to be true. Most of the time it is true. Your reputation is sand. You don't have to do anything. You just have to look like you're doing something. You just have to look, you just have to look conservative. Your reputation is sand. So there it is. Popularity is sand. Because people are fickle. You can be popular one day and the next day nobody knows who you are. Career is sand. Because we all want to make it to the top. But the base where you start off is this wide. The top is this wide. There'll be one person up there. So work hard, do the best you can, but I guarantee you that probably won't be you. How many times have people spent their life climbing the ladder of success, only to find out the ladder's leaning against the wrong building? One little economic bump in their downside. Even in the most secure jobs. I want you to pray for my daughter, Sarah. Sarah and Pat have 3 boys. Chris just turned 23. Yes, on July 4th, yesterday. And the other boy was in junior high and was in elementary. And she's worked for the Immigration National Nations Service, now ICE, her whole career, since she could start work after her transplant surgery. And she's been there 24 years. And she's worked her way up in HR as a trainer and everything. And I don't know about you, ever been aware of what's going on with them. They're fee-based. They never had any issues because all their income for ICE is based on the immigration fees. No problem. But suddenly all that is gone. You just got furloughed. He's the primary breadwinner. See, your career can be sand. It can be gone in just a moment. Health. Health is sand. You can be fine one day, and the next day be in the hospital under the knife, and something happens. It just goes that way. Talent is sand. You can have great talent. You can have tremendous talent. You can be a tremendous athlete. And all you do is blow out your knee one time. That's gone. So the resolution is, what are you going to build your house on? You're going to build your house, your life, your family, your future on something that can be taken away in an instant by somebody else? We sat on July 3rd, and Timmy and his family is up in another family camping up outside of Yosemite. So just Adam and Kathy and I, and we had dinner. So want to watch a movie. So let's watch something, something about what 4th of July is all about. And we were talking back and forth. At first we were going to watch The Patriot, but that's just sometimes a little overwhelming. And we ended up watching The Last of the Mohicans. Love that movie. Love that movie, And it's just amazing. It's just amazing movie. And I love that movie. It's so good. And you start with these guys, this family, father and 2 sons. By the end of the movie, you have this 2 families. This story is about 2 families. Father and 2 sons, and a colonel with 2 daughters. By the end of the movie, only one of each left. It doesn't take much. You can have a lot of talent. You can have a lot of things. But there's always going to be somebody better than you. If you ever see when Tim and Tracy are here, they usually drive his truck. It's a big truck. And it was a big truck when he got it, and he likes to play with it, and it's bigger and taller and has bigger wheels. It's a big truck. And he put the last set of wheels on, and after the last lift, and got it where he sort of wants it, sort of likes it where it is right now. And he was just like, he drove it for the first time, came back and said, Dad, there's always somebody with a bigger truck. What are you going to build your life around? Jesus says, and it makes this amazing statement, he who hears my words and puts them into practice. So there's conditions. You have to hear the word. You have to hear what Jesus is saying. Now, he's just said this whole Sermon on the Mount. And in that Sermon on the Mount, he said, don't listen to those guys. They're wrong. Don't do what they say. And then he said, look at those religious leaders. Don't do what they do. They're doing it wrong. They're doing it for the wrong reason. And then he began to explain to them why and show them the way they should live and how they should live from the inside out and from the heart out. He began to show that to them. And after he showed that to them and explained all of that to them, then he said, now, he who listens to my words and does it is like the man who built his house upon the rock. A lot of people think they've heard it, and that's okay. I've heard it. Doesn't mean it's okay. My aunts and uncles, my mom, and the whole generation are all gone. I had an aunt, my Aunt Gay, was just a wonderful woman. And we moved out here to California in 1962. She was married to a guy named Paul Rosenbluth. Now, Paul Rosenbluth was a funny guy. He was an absolutely brilliant guy. Absolutely brilliant. He was Jewish, not a good believer in anything, but he could quote him, and he had the New Testament memorized. He said, he'd quote the Bible to you. And he knew it. For whatever reason, he knew the Old Testament New Testament. He could just quote it to you. He was a funny guy. Provided well for his family. Knew the Bible. And then one day we got a call. And see, back in the 60s, there was a string of bank robberies in the San Fernando Valley. And they called the guy Butt Jeff. One was tall and thin, and the other was short and sort of rotund. And the tall and thin guy would come in and do one thing, and the short rotund guy would jump over they didn't have all the barriers, they just had he would jump over and he'd go, "That was my Uncle Paul!" He went away. In fact, he went away for like 8 years. And when he came back, our first Thanksgiving back at my aunt's house, and that's where we had Thanksgiving, at her house. And we're all sitting around the table, and my aunt's trying to tell a story back from before, and she feels, it's all sort of awkward, and she says, "Yeah, that was before you." She looked at Paul and said, before you went away." He looked right at her and said, "I didn't go anywhere. I went anywhere, honey. They came and took me." You have to hear the word, but you have to put it into practice. Putting it into practice builds your life on the solid bedrock and foundation of Jesus Christ. It means you build your life, you build your marriage, you build your finances, you build your relationships, you build your hobbies, your dreams, everything on Jesus. It doesn't mean you don't have all those things. It just means that you base your foundation of your life upon Jesus Christ. You give yourself to Him and to His Word. And you do what He would have you do. But what He would have you do isn't a matter of not doing this for a job and doing that. What He would have you do is the kind of person that you are. It has to do with character and faith and hope and love and grace. I mean, what did Jesus say? "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." He said, "What does it profit a man should he gain the whole world and lose his soul?" He said, "Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. All this will be added to you. Don't seek the world stuff. Seek my stuff. The world stuff, I'll make sure you have." He said to Nicodemus, "Unless you're born again, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven." When he asked what the greatest command was, he said to love the Lord your God with all of your heart and your soul and your mind and the strength. And the second is tied to it, love your neighbor as yourself. So you want to build your house, your life, your family upon the rock? You're building it upon the rock of Jesus Christ. The solid foundation. The cornerstone upon which everything else breaks and crumbles. And it has to do with hearing the Word, knowing the Word, living the Word. Hear the Word, know the Word, live the Word. You have to put it into practice. If you don't put it into practice, it doesn't matter what you know. That was the point all the way through this message. These guys know all the stuff. They're not doing it right. Or when they do it right, they're doing it for the wrong reason. It comes from the heart. That's what he's trying to say. How many remember the Coalinga earthquake? Some of you remember that. I remember that. It wasn't here, so it didn't get a lot of press, but the Coalinga earthquake taught us a whole lot. It occurred several years ago. What they found at the Coalinga earthquake was something sort of I illustrated when I talked about what happened in Soma. That houses that were built and strongly bolted to the foundation withstood an 8.2 earthquake. Houses that were built and just lightly bolted to their foundation were torn down. Were just destroyed. And the houses that were built in those days, most of them weren't highly tied to the foundation, just occasionally. So they made that discovery that it's all about the foundation, it's all about what you're bolted to. How many of you have been across the Golden Gate Bridge? Isn't it great? Unless you're afraid of bridges. You know. Did you know that the San Andreas Fault goes directly under the Golden Gate Bridge? Right under. That's where it comes out of there, under the Golden Gate Bridge. And the Golden Gate Bridge has two piers. It's a mile span in the middle, and in that mile span in the middle, it'll sway a number of feet. It's only been closed 3 times in its history, and it wasn't because of earthquakes or hurricanes or anything like that. It was because of windstorms. And it wasn't because the bridge was in danger. The winds were strong enough to knock buses over, to knock vehicles over on the bridge, so they would close the bridge. Now I want to tell you, if you're going to San Francisco and there's an earthquake, the safest place in San Francisco to be in an earthquake is in the middle of that bridge. Because you go to the edge, you see that span, those metal cables? You go over those two piers, those 2 pylons, and they come down to the edge. And all of those cables are anchored deep in the bedrock, and anchored or surrounded by concrete. And it is so strong, everything is tied. It's not about the metal in the bridge, it's not about the strength of the piers, it's about the cables being anchored in the bedrock. And it will withstand almost anything. Every single piece of that bridge is dependent on the anchors, where it's anchored. Every bit of your life is dependent on where it's anchored, and whether it's anchored in Jesus Christ. Now I'm going to read the passage again. I'm going to read it from a different version called The Message. It's sort of a paraphrase, as it gives you a different picture. These words I speak to you are not incidental additions to your life, homeowner improvements to your standard of living. They are foundational words, words to build a life on. If you work these words into your life, you're like a smart carpenter who built his house on solid rock. Rain poured down, river flooded, tornado hit, nothing moved that house. It was fixed to the rock. But if you just use my words in Bible studies and don't work them into your life, you're a stupid carpenter who built his house on a sandy beach. When the storm rolled in and the wave came up, he collapsed like a house of cards. That's a different picture, isn't it? It says when Jesus, the message goes on to say, they put it this way, when Jesus concluded his message, the crowd burst into applause. They never heard teaching like this. Because he was teaching as one with authority. You know what his authority was? What you're hearing is wrong. This is the truth. You need to live by the truth. You need to practice the truth. And your life will be solid. If you don't live by the truth, the practice of the truth, of my words, your house is built on sand. Then we come back to where we started. And a storm is coming. A storm is coming. That storm could be for us. We're due for another major earthquake. That storm could be for us, as it has been several times, major fires that sweep through the area. We've had homes all around us destroyed. That storm could be political upheaval. You may not realize it. You may not want to hear it. You may not know it. That's what they're counting on. All the stuff we've been through follows the Marxist Revolution handbook to the T. And we admitted that. The other people want to take over our country. And that's what you need to understand. A storm is coming. A storm is coming. Now, it may be an earthquake, it may be a firestorm, it may be a rainstorm, it may be a political storm. Whether you survive the storm depends on how you build your house. You know? And what you're willing to give. As I said before, as for me and my house, we talk about our house at home, our house in the church. We'll follow the Lord. If that storm goes bad, the idea is go after history, go after the monuments, go after the lessons, and go after the people. The next step is go after the church monuments. Man's already done that to go into churches and deface anything that portrays Jesus as something they don't like. After you deface the monuments, then you deface the crosses, and eventually you go after the people. That's how it's worked every single time in history. Every single time it's been successful, that's how it's worked. Be ye warned. The storm is coming. Sooner or later, the storm is coming. Are you dependent on Jesus? You're going to stand for him. Now, if you stand for Jesus in that storm, your survival is not guaranteed. Okay? Your survival is not guaranteed. If it's a political storm and that goes bad, you are the enemy. You can see that happening everywhere in the world where this is taking place. That's fine. Church thrives under persecution. We live and die by Christ. Like Paul said, I'd like to remain here and serve. But if I go home, I get to be with you. One way or another, I'm praying hard in the spiritual battle so that doesn't happen. But even if that doesn't happen, there's a storm coming. That storm could be a phone call you get about someone in your family who's just in a horrible automobile accident. That storm could be a financial downturn that somehow takes your money out. That storm could be waking up in the middle of the night and realizing something isn't right. You have to call 911. Maybe you'll survive that heart surgery, maybe you won't. That storm could be having the oncologist in the room. When you get to that point, when you have an oncologist in your room, that's a storm. I don't know what kind of storm it's going to be. It could be one that affects all of us. It could be one storm that affects us individually. I've had almost all those storms. In one way or another, with someone in my family. Different one. And you've had them too. Is your house built on the bedrock of Jesus Christ? Are you hearing his words, and are you putting them into practice? It's that simple. That doesn't mean it isn't difficult, but it's that simple. Hear and know his words and do them. If you don't do them, knowing them doesn't mean a thing. It's the combination. Build your house. Father God, we thank you. Jesus wrapped up his sermon and it just sort of blew everybody away because he was telling them, you better do this. Nobody ever really told them that. But he's not that way. He spoke with authority, because he has the authority of the Son of God in the flesh, of God incarnate. And that authority would be backed up by his death, burial, and resurrection. We need to pay heed. And we can only answer that one at a time. We can answer that individually, we can answer that as individual family groups, and we can answer that as a church. To build our house on the rock of Jesus. Help us do that. Nothing more, nothing less, but to build our lives